Morning and a happy Lag BaOmer. Every year in Lag BaOmer, I think of this, I share it with you. On the one hand, Lag BaOmer is it's a very mystical day, right? It's a day of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's passing, as described in the Zohar. Actually, the Zohar doesn't say the date Lag BaOmer. The date Lag BaOmer is by tradition recorded in the Eitz Chaim and other Svarim. But the day of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's passing is described in the Zohar. It's a day when he revealed Torah that he never revealed in his whole life. Very transcendent and mystical day. And somewhat paradoxically, the way the Rebbe decided to celebrate the day of Lag BaOmer wasn't so much in mystical practices as there are in some circles, lighting a fire, dancing, or in the old days, sometimes you go out to the woods, meditate, teach deep wisdoms of Torah. Here. The Rebbe turned it into a kids' parade. A kids' parade. This lofty, mystical day, a kids' parade. It's kind of paradoxical, but that's kind of the point. It's kind of the point. The reason for the purpose for which Hashem reveals these deeper secrets of Torah as time goes on is not so that the one who learns it becomes more mystically ascetic and more detached from the world, lives in his own little cocoon of mystical spirituality. Never sees it as, on the contrary, the reason Hashem gives us all this extra mysticism and spirituality as expressed in the Kabbalah and in the Zohar, the Rizal, Chassidus, which gets more and more revealed, is precisely so that a young Jewish child can be proud to march in the street that he's Jewish. That's the whole reason why Hashem gave us all that mysticism. Precisely for that kid to walk down the street, I'm proudly Jewish. This is a uniquely post-war Western American version of Judaism. You know, in the pre-war Europe, this wasn't the thing. March in the street because you're Jewish. What are you even talking about? Go to Cheder, listen to what your Rebbe's told, or get the ruler on the wrist. And came to America, they turned it around. Said, march on the street, proudly, hold your banners. I'm Jewish. I'm proud. You know, we never started this in the 40s. It was not very popular. Today, everybody does it. Then, the post-war, the attitude was, be a Jew in the home and an American on the street. You know, march on the street if you're Jewish. Not everybody has to know you're Jewish. You do what you have to at home, and then never understood. No, it's not the way to do it. Kids got to march on the street proudly Jewish. Today, everybody has a parade for everything. Back then, it wasn't so popular, but and specifically on the most mystical day of all the year, that's when this children Jewish pride is expressed. That's an unbelievable paradox that I love to think about and point out every year. Yeah, what do you want to say?
I just can't. Most great rabbis, most of the great rabbis who died, we fast on that day.
That's right.
And this one, we're celebrating.
Yep. And Rishon Bar Yochai asked that it be celebrated. In the Zohar, they refer to, he says, I want it to be celebrated. In the Zohar, the passing of a tzaddik is referred to as hilula, rather than the classic Hebrew histalkos. Histalkos means the removal. Mistalek. Right, so it's removed. Hilula is the same word that's used to describe a wedding. Like hilul, to dance, to joy, jubilation. This is from the mystical perspective, although it remains true that death is not something that we accept as Jews. We do not accept death as a fact. Death is a consequence of sin and should not exist. Right? Death only came onto this earth after Adam messed up. So it should not exist. It's a consequence of our state of sin. And that's why when Mashiach comes, that we return back to the original state as it was prior to the sin, when there's no death. So we still maintain that we don't accept death. But nonetheless, the fact that the soul returns to Hashem is a celebration, only for someone who remained connected the entire time.
But the real first death was Abel, wasn't it?
Yeah. I'm saying is that for a soul that came to this earth and sometimes struggled to maintain its connection to Hashem, then the reunifying with Hashem after passing could be painful because it's got to let go of all the garbage it picked up in this world. But for people who live their entire life to begin with connected to Hashem, then transition from the soul in the body to the soul out of the body is not as dramatic because they were consistently connected to Hashem the whole time. And from that perspective, it's this celebration of all the achievements that this tzaddik went through in his life is a celebration on the day when all that achievement goes up with him to be reconnected to Hashem. So it's a celebration. That's why Rishon Baruch Hu asked that it be a celebration. So yes, it is indeed unique in that regard. And very clearly a highly mystical thing. There's a few mystical practices that have become widespread amongst basically all Jews. Some are aware that it's mystical, some are not aware that it's mystical. But there are certain practices that have been widespread amongst, celebrated by all Jews, that are outright mystical. One of them is Lag BaOmer, another is the Lecha Dodi. The Lecha Dodi is a mystical prayer written by Shlomo Alkabetz, who was a mystic in the school of Arizal, in that era in Tzfat, that famous short era of mystical explosion in Tzfat. So these are a few practices, amongst others, that have become ubiquitous throughout Jewish life, even to those who don't claim to be mystically connected. But these practices have their roots in mysticism. The celebration of Lag BaOmer is one such example. It's probably the starkest example.
I was so taken aback when I first went there because we went to see Zalman's mother.
Yeah.
Zalman, he broke in English, Hebrew, all those things. And we went to see his mother. I figured I'm going to see an old lady.
No,
And I'm going to see a lady that speaks only.
She's an American woman.
What am I doing there? Come in, stop to the American accent.
Yeah. Okay, Yidden, let's learn some Gemara. So what do we have yesterday? The Mishnah told us at the 9th hour, Samuch L'Mincha, near the mid-Mincha time, 9th hour from sunrise, on Erev Pesach, one is to refrain from eating so that they come to eat the Yom Tov meal, primarily, which begins with matzah. They have an appetite. They're not full. The Gemara introduced the Mishnaic text, which told us a dispute. Rabbi Yehuda is of the view that every Shabbos and Yom Tov, at Mincha time, stop eating so that you come to your Shabbos meal with an appetite. Rabbi Yossi said, no problem, eat whatever you'd like all afternoon, all the way till it gets dark. The Gemara assumed that our Mishnah, which says you're supposed to stop eating before in the evening of Pesach, in the late afternoon of Pesach, is consistent with the view of Rabbi Yehuda, which says that in the late afternoon of Shabbos and Yom Tov, you should stop eating. If that's the case, why did our Mishnah single out Erev Pesach? Seemingly, every Shabbos and Yom Tov has the same rule. To which the Gemara responded and said, no. Actually, our Mishnah is coming to tell us that when it comes to Erev Pesach, there's no dispute. In the Brisa, it said there's a dispute about every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov. Rabbi Yehuda says you stop eating before late afternoon, and Rabbi Yossi says keep on going. And our Mishnah comes and says, hey, Erev Pesach is unique, that even Rabbi Yossi, who allows you to eat on an ordinary Shabbos and Yom Tov all the way up till nightfall, he will agree that in Erev Pesach, late afternoon, stop eating so you come to your matzah with an appetite. Because it's unique. Every Shabbos and Yom Tov, the mitzvah is to enjoy the meal of Shabbos and Yom Tov. But Pesach, in addition to the meal, there's a unique mitzvah of matzah. No other Yom Tov has a mitzvah of eating anything particular on the evening. All the other Yom Tovim, you just have to eat. There's no particularly unique food item. On Pesach, there's a particularly unique food item the Torah commands us to eat, matzah. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi, even though ordinarily he says, no eating, you can eat as much as you'd like in the afternoon of Shabbos and Yom Tov, of Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov. When it comes to Pesach, stop eating. So our Mishnah, which singles out Pesach, is to indicate that in Pesach there's no dispute, and even Rabbi Yossi agrees. That's where we left off. Now we're in the middle of the page. The last line on the word is Rav. And the first word, the next line is Papa. Papa Amar, Papa says, Afilo Tema, we could even suggest Rabbi Yehuda that our Mishnah is exclusively following Rabbi Yehuda's view. Rabbi Yehuda, who said that every Shabbos and Yom Tov, at the mincha times, you have to stop eating. But our Mishnah singled out Erev Pesach. So if this is true of every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, why would the Mishnah single out Pesach? If we're going to make this Mishnah consistent with Rabbi Yehuda's view, right? Yesterday's answer was it singles out Erev Pesach because we're trying to include Rabbi Yossi to say he too agrees. The struggle there is that when Rabbi Yossi said his law, he didn't give any exceptions to the rule. He didn't give any exceptions. So therefore, the Papa suggests, well, maybe our Mishnah is consistent with Rabbi Yehuda's view. Rabbi Yehuda says every single Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, you have to stop eating at mincha time. So that's the case. Why would our Mishnah single out Pesach if it's true of every Yom Tov? So it says the Mishnah Gemara, when it comes to every Erev Shabbos and every Erev Yom Tov, from the mincha hour and onward, who the asr, that's when it is forbidden to eat. Samuch lemincha, just before the mincha time, sharde is permissible. Hold on a second. Let's we have to get the language clear here. Aval Erev Pesach, but I'm translating literally, and I'll explain in a moment. Aval Erev Pesach, but on Erev Pesach, afilu samuch lemincha, even before the mincha time, nami asr, it's also forbidden. So let's explain. Our Mishnah says, look at the top line of the Gemara. Erev Pesachim samuch lemincha. Samuch lemincha means near the mincha time. Rashbam told us it's a half an hour before the mincha time. So the mincha time, halfway between when you're allowed to start davening mincha and nightfall, is 9.5 hours from sunrise. Near the mincha time means, give it another half an hour. From the 9th hour, you stop eating. That's what samuch lemincha means, near the mincha time. But if you look at the Mishnah text the Gemara introduced yesterday, which tells us the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, and there it says that Rabbi Yehuda is of the view that every single Shabbos and every single Erev Yom Tov to stop eating. What's the language there? The language there is, you can look at the line. The third line after the big bold Gemara, Gimel Mem, two lines under the last words min ha-mincha l'mayla, from mincha and onward, not samuch l'mincha, not near the mincha, but from mincha itself. So it says in our Papa, maybe that's the distinction. When it comes to every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, everything explicitly states when they have to stop eating at the mincha time, namely 9.5 hours from sunrise, 9.5 halachic hours. Whereas our Mishnah says on Erev Pesach you stop near the mincha time, which is an extra half an hour. And that's why our Mishnah singles out Erev Pesach. Because the law of Erev Pesach is different than every other day, every other Shabbos and Yom Tov. Every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, you stop eating at the mincha time. Whereas Erev Pesach, you stop a half an hour earlier near the mincha time. And that's why our Mishnah singles it out. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are we missing?
Between mincha time and the time that you're eating.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? An hour, 2 hours at the most?
2.5 halachic hours.
So if you eat them right before, you're going to be full 2.5 hours later.
So it's a good point.
It should be, early in the day.
So maybe that's why the extra half an hour is given on Erev Pesach. But you have to also remember, you're not eating by nightfall. By nightfall, you slept in Daven Ma'ariv.
Yeah.
Then you have to go make Kiddush. You have to say your Haggadah. So still you start eating is 3.5 hours later. Let's say you're not doing it quickly. Let's say you're not doing it as long as we do. You're rushing through it. It's still a good 3 hours after.
But you're eating a big meal. You're eating a lot of matzah.
Right, but 3 hours after you eat, and you still have an appetite, even if you ate a full meal.
4 cups of wine.
Right, but what I'm saying is that the point is that when you start eating a matzah, you should have an appetite. If you haven't eaten in 3 hours, you still have an appetite. You're not stuffed.
Sure that's relevant.
Right, but
just pointing out a difference. Enough of a difference.
Yes.
That says that Passover.
That's the main point there. Yeshua's right. The main accepting that the time frame is enough to keep your appetite going, because you're not going to be stuffed even if you fill yourself up to the top 3 hours. 3 hours later, you still can eat. The point is you shouldn't come to the meal and I can't put any food in my mouth because I just ate half an hour ago. It's 3 hours ago. I can eat something. But the point here is, Yeshua's right. The main point here is to explain why our Mishnah singles out Erev Pesach. So we had two different approaches. Approach number one is to tell us that Erev Pesach is no dispute. Even Rabbi Yossi ordinarily says you may eat all afternoon Shabbat, Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov. On Erev Pesach agrees you may not. That's approach number one as to why our Mishnah singles out Erev Pesach. Approach number two, and this is our Papa's approach that we're learning today, is that on every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, Rabbi Yehuda, who's the dominant view here, maintains that you have to stop eating at the mincha hour. Erev Pesach is singled out to start a little earlier, half an hour before the mincha time. And that's why our Mishnah singles out Erev Pesach. And this is expressed in the extra word the Mishnah puts in. The Mishnah says, Samuch lemincha, near the mincha time, stop eating. Whereas the Braisa, where Rabbi Yehuda says every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov you may not eat, doesn't say near the mincha time, it says at the mincha time. That extra word, near the mincha time, gives us the uniqueness of Erev Pesach, this extra half an hour. This is what we have so far. To which the Gemara responds. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines on the bottom of the page, second word. Be'erev Shabbos. Are you suggesting, says the Gemara, that Be'erev Shabbos on Friday afternoon before Shabbos, Samuch lemincha, near the mincha time, half an hour before, Shari is permissible? That's the premise of the distinction here. The premise of Rav Papa's distinction is that on every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, you stop eating at the mincha. On Erev Pesach, you start a half an hour before, which would mean on a regular Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, a half an hour before mincha, you may eat. Mm-hmm. That would be the understanding at the moment. To which the Gemara says, is that correct? V'hatanya, but we learned in another Mishnah text. So now we have a third text we're introducing. Lo yochel adam b'erev Shabbos b'yom tovim. One should not eat on Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov. Mitesha shows l'mayla, from 9 hours and onward. When's the mincha time? 9.5 hours. This text says to start when? 9 hours.
That would be consistent with the Pesach.
With the Pesach one.
And there's no
distinction between Pesach and the Shabbos and Yom Tov. Mm-hmm. You're trying to point out the distinction between regular Shabbos and Yom Tov and Pesach. That Pesach starts a half an hour before the 9th hour. And every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov starts at 9.5 hours. But now we have a third Mishnah text which says, stop eating at 9th hour. So now we have 3 texts. One text tells us
before
a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, whether you may eat on Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, whether you may not eat on Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov. And there the language is from Mincha and onward. Mm-hmm. We have a second Mishnah text, which we're in the middle of reading right now, in which again there's a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. But this time it says not from Mincha and onward, it says from the 9th hour and onward. And we have our Mishnah which singles out Erev Pesach and uses language near Mincha. So initially we tried to say that from Mincha and near Mincha are different designations. Mm-hmm. But now that this third text introduces from the 9th hour and onward, we can no longer make that distinction. Meaning, when the Mishnah says near Mincha or at Mincha, it really actually means the same thing, which is the 9th hour, considering that this third text indicates straight up 9th hour onward. Yeah. We're clear?
I can understand why Pesach is being singled out.
What's before you say that? If the law is the same everywhere, there's no reason to single it out. That's the premise here.
Pesach is different. It's really different.
Why?
Because you've got a lot to drink, and you're eating the matzah.
You're giving a reason why the law should be different on Pesach versus the rest of the time. Now you're taking a side in the disputes. But you have to understand something. We're not trying to understand why Pesach is different. We can give a lot of explanations for that. We're trying to understand why the Mishnah singles it out if the law is the same everywhere. Now, the fact that you have a reason for why Pesach is different is irrelevant, is immaterial. If the law is the same, the law is the same. It doesn't make a difference if it has more weight to the law. In other words, what you're suggesting is that Pesach has more reason not to eat before, right? That's your point. Okay, one second. But you're giving but let's make this clear. You're giving a reason for why Pesach has more reason not to eat before, correct?
Yeah.
But the law still is, you still can't eat in the other Yom Tov. Which means when you're telling me the law, singling one out because there's a more of a reason is not material, it's immaterial. So I agree with you that in premise, there's lots of reasons to say Pesach should be unique. But the fact is the law remains the same everywhere. And if the law remains the same everywhere, when you're telling me the law, include everything. Even though you're right in theory as to why, right? Because the Gemara here is not trying to figure out why should I wait, why should I stop eating? The Gemara is trying to figure out why the Mishnah is singling it out when clearly the law is the same everywhere. Unless it's singling it out because the law is different. Why is the law different? Because you're saying you have much more to eat. There's a unique mitzvah Pesach. But that's only consistent if you follow Rabbi Yossi, who says ordinarily you're allowed to continue eating. Follow? But Rabbi Yehuda, who says the law is the same everywhere, that you're never allowed to eat before Shabbos and Yom Tov, even though Pesach has more of a reason not to eat, there's no reason to single it out because the law stays the same everywhere. That's the Gemara struggling with here. Clear? Yeah? Okay. What?
But Shabbos, you can come on a full stomach to Shabbos because.
So, Alan, you're making a mistake again. You're making a mistake here. The mistake you're making is you're taking your logic and imposing it on Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. We have to do the other way around. We have to take Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi's thinking and impose it on our logic, not the reverse. You're taking a side in the question here when you shouldn't be doing that. What we have to be doing is understanding all the sides, not taking a side. Right? You're taking a side. The Gemara gave a good logical analysis that Shabbos and Yom Tov you're allowed to eat till the end, Pesach you can't. I'm taking that side. Mistake. Because if the Gemara introduces another side, we can understand that other side too. So don't make the mistake of taking a side in the Gemara's disputes. It's a big mistake people make. But it makes so much sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
To you. But Rabbi Yehuda is smarter than me and smarter than you, and he says otherwise. So let's understand what he's saying. So you can't take a side in the Gemara disputes. You have to understand all the Gemara's views. So we can't make the mistake. Yeah? No, it's fine. You can have your own opinion. But you still have to understand Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Okay?
Mistake. I'm just saying that in one you don't have to eat everything.
No,
and the other you have to eat.
The mistake is because it's holding you back from learning. Because when you take a side, it's hard to learn the other side.
I know.
So we can't do it. Be very careful.
I'm just trying to get it into my mind.
Right. Okay. So then however Rabbi Yehuda explains why you shouldn't be, why Shabbos and Yom Tov is the same as all Pesach. The fact is he says it's all the same. Right. So the Gemara tried suggesting that an Erev Pesach is the extra half an hour. That in regular Shabbos and Yom Tov, if you stop, in Rabbi Yehuda's view, at 9.5 hours, and at Pesach you stop at 9 hours. To which the Gemara says, no, we have a text which says Rabbi Yehuda says you stop every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov at the 9th hour, which means in Rabbi Yehuda's view, for whatever reason, we'll figure it out later. But the fact is, he says every Shabbos and Yom Tov is the same as Pesach. So how do we explain why our Mishnah singles out Erev Pesach? This is where we are. So let's continue. Let's finish this text. Batanya lo yochel Erev Shabbos Yom Tovim miteish shayos l'mayla. The Mishnah text which says that one may not eat on any Erev Shabbos and any Erev Yom Tov from the 9th hour onward. The Shikonis the Shabbos kishutaiva, so that he enters Shabbos hungry because he wants to eat. It's still a mitzvah. It's not as many mitzvahs with as many food as Pesach. So what? It's still a mitzvah to eat in Shabbos. So come with an appetite. Give it Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda's view. Rabbi Yossi says no. That you can keep on eating as much as you want. But the point here is, Rabbi Yehuda makes no distinction between Pesach and Shabbos, even with respect to that extra half an hour. Every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov wants to stop eating in Rabbi Yehuda's view from the 9th hour. Yeah. Mm-hmm. To which the Gemara says, last line, Omer Marzutra said, Man Leimalan, who's going to come and tell you, to Metartzehi, that this brisa is perfectly accurate in its text? Who's to tell you that? Because clearly we have two texts that differ in their language. One text says, Rabbi Yehuda says to stop eating from the mincha time. Another text says, stop eating from the 9th hour. Why are you saying that the 9th hour one is the correct one and the mincha time is the incorrect one? Maybe the mincha time one is the correct one, the 9th hour is a mistaken text. Because mincha and 9th hour is not the same. Mincha is 9.5 hours. So why are you so convinced, says Marzutra, that the one that says 9th hour, that's the correct one? Top of Kufamad Aleph, top of 100a. Dilma, perhaps, Mishabashti, maybe the text is not so accurate. The one that says ninth hour. In which case, there would be a distinction. If we assume that the text which says ninth hour stop eating is an incorrect text, and the one that says mincha time onward is the correct text, then we have a distinction between Pesach and the rest of the year. The rest of the year you stop at 9.5 hours. Pesach you stop at 9 hours. Assuming that the text which says ninth hour is an incorrect text, and that the correct text is the one that says from mincha time onward. So Amar Le Miremar.
Because the other text says near mincha.
Our Mishnah says near mincha.
Okay,
The other text says at mincha.
So there's a difference.
Okay, that would be the difference. Our Mishnah says our Mishnah cannot be. Our Mishnah, remember, the Mishnah is edited by Rabbi Levi. So if he went through and edited every word, then that's the correct version, certainly. So the fact that Erev Pesach you stop near mincha, that's for sure accurate, which you stop at 9th hour. But then we have two extra Mishnaic texts that are outside the Mishnah and did not go through the same editing scruples. One says from mincha stop eating, one says from 9 hours stop eating.
We're trying to see
at mincha is 9.5 hours, which is a half an hour after the 9 hours. So which one's the incorrect text? The one that says from mincha time, which would be 9.5 hours, or the one that says at 9 hours? If you say the correct one is the one that says at 9 hours, then it's the exact same thing as Pesach, which says near mincha.
Right.
If you say that the correct one is at mincha time, then you have a half-hour discrepancy. And if you have a half-hour discrepancy, that explains why Pesach is singled out, because a half an hour extra where you can't eat.
Right. We have to see which one is.
So which one's the correct one?
To see this,
Does
to
it?
support this
Correct.
differentiation.
Correct.
Under
Is that clear? Yeah, correct. Apology. Correct. Clear. So Amalei Meremar tells his friend Marzotra. V'itema. Others say it was not it wasn't Meremar but Rav Yemar. Not Meremar but Rav Yemar. Okay. In any event, one of these scholars said, "Ano ikloy lepirka de Rav Pinchas bered Rav Ami." I went to go study by Rav Pinchas son of Rav Ami. V'kam Tana v'Tani Kamei, and someone got up there and taught the Mishnah in the manner that says 9 hours and onward. Someone said that there. Someone said, I have a text by tradition from the Mishnaic era, which says that the Buddha says you're no longer allowed to eat from 9 hours onward on any Shabbos and Yom Tov.
That's also.
He said that version.
So near mincha.
Not near, yeah, which is near mincha, 9 hours and onward. The kibla minei, and now Pinchas accepted this. So clearly, this is the correct version. Right. Otherwise, he would have said, hey, it's not 9 hours, 9.5 hours.
Someone who validated.
Someone validated this text.
Or corroborated.
Corroborated the text. So, if so, kasha. If so, we have a question. Why is our Mishnah singling out Pesach when seemingly it's the exact same thing as every other Shabbos? You have to figure out this view. We have to stop eating at the 9th hour. Because we just substantiated that text.
Rav Papa's argument is sort of falling away.
That's correct. Which is that's what the Gemara says. Ella, rather, machmarta, better go with Rav Huna's view, which said the reason why our Mishnah singles out Pesach is to tell you that even Rabbi Yossi, who says you may eat on every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov, on Pesach he agrees you may not eat on Erev Pesach because you have lots of wine and matzah, to Alan's point. So the Gemara gave one suggestion, introduced another, rejected the other, and went back to the first suggestion.
All that for a half hour.
It's not about a half an hour. It's about the law.
Yeah.
What's the law? Right? What's the law? I'm sitting and eating. Stop.
But so much arguments and so much. They must have argued like almost
discussed,
hitting each other for a super half hour.
Okay, so the Gemara tomorrow is going to challenge us even further, introducing another statement from Rabbi Huna. But let's summarize where we are. Bring the whole thing together in order. The Gemara first suggested, why are we singling out Pesach? To teach you that even Rabbi Yossi, who says ordinarily you may eat all the way through Erev Shabbos, on Pesach may not. That was the Gemara's first suggestion. To which the Gemara responded and said, well, maybe I can substantiate a distinction between Pesach and the rest of the year, even in Rabbi Huda's view. Namely, that extra half an hour. On every Erev Pesach, every Erev Shabbos and Yom Tov stop at 9.5 hours, which is the mincha time. Erev Pesach stop at the 9th hour, which is near the mincha time, extra half an hour. The Gemara rejected that by introducing a corroborated text, which says that Rabbi Yehuda says on a regular Shabbos and Yom Tov, you have to stop eating at the 9th hour. So we have a corroborated text that says Pesach and the rest of the year are exactly the same in Rabbi Yehuda's view, that you may not eat in the 9th hour. So therefore the Gemara said, well, let's go back to Rabbi Yehuda's original view, which said that the reason why Pesach is singled out is to teach you that even Rabbi Yossi, which says ordinarily you may eat Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov, Pesach, you've got to stop because you have matzah. This is where we are right now. The Gemara is going to further challenge that, God willing, tomorrow.
Wow.
A happy Lag BaOmer, and channel all the blessings that are available on this very special and unique and mystical day. A wonderful day, even. Good Yom Tov.